I'm Christine Dunbar from SpeechModification.com, and this is my Smart American Accent training. In this video, we'll look at how to pronounce Washington. We can also look at Washington, D.C. versus Washington State. So Washington is a name, obviously, of the District of Columbia and also of one of the 50 states here in the U.S., and Washington happens to be the state that I live in. Washington has stress on the first syllable. So the wash syllable is long and the ington syllables are short. That just means they're going to be shorter in duration and possibly have reduced vowels. The vowel A in Washington can be an ah, like I've depicted here with AW, like I saw Washington. You will also hear some people say it with more of an ah vowel, Washington. That's because the continuum between the ah and the ah is a little bit flexible. So you can have a little bit of rounding there, Washington, like saw, or it can be unrounded like Washington. I tend to use more of the ah rounded vowel, but when there's a W, we just naturally have some rounding there from the w. So Washington. I'm not really doing, I'm not too far in the ah, too dark in the ah. So it's not Washington. It's not Washington, but somewhere in between. Washington. This is the same vowel that we use in words like water, wash, want. Lots of times with the W and the A combination, you're going to have somewhere in this ah range. Then the letters SH, the sh continuing sound. We have our ing, which is very typical of the I vowel, and the ng, washing, just like washing machine or washing clothes, the verb washing. And then with the ton, we don't use an O sound here. We use either a schwa or almost no vowel, Washington, because it's very short and reduced because that syllable goes by very quickly. So we don't have a clear vowel there. You can use a T, Washington, or sometimes because we blend from the NG to the T, it ends up being a little bit more of a flap like Washington. I would say Washington is more typical, but it's not going to be a strong T. Not Washington, but Washington. Very reduced there. Then when we add Washington, D.C., which is the Washington District of Columbia, the capital of the U.S., we just say the D and the C as the letter names. For more help with how to pronounce letter names, I do have a video for this. I also have a video for help with spelling over the phone so that you can give letter names, D as in dog, C as in Charlie, for example, so people can understand you well. And then if you're saying Washington, D.C., D and C are both stressed. There's primary stress on the first syllable of Washington. For example, the capital is in Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. is where the White House is. Then we also have Washington State, which sometimes we just call Washington, but sometimes people don't know if you're talking about Washington, D.C. or Washington State, in which case you have to say Washington State, where your stress is a little bit more on state. Otherwise, you can just say Washington, and depending on the context, people may know which one you're talking about. I do have a few videos for some other state names and city names. If you have a request you'd like to see me cover, either for a name or a word in our Word of the Day series, feel free to leave that in the comments for this video or any of my videos. I'd be happy to add it to my list to cover in a future class. I'll be back again tomorrow with another Word of the Day class, as well as on Friday, we'll have our live question and answer class. You can attend that live, type your questions in the chat, and we'll talk about the things that you need help with in American English pronunciation and American accent. Check out our free and low-cost online courses on speechmodification.com. And thank you so much to those of you who have subscribed to the channel. I really appreciate your support. And a special shout out to my channel members. Thank you so much for joining, and I really appreciate your support. I'm Christine Dunbar from SpeechModification.com. Remember, if you want to sound like a native speaker, you can do it. SpeechModification.com. Bye, everyone. Hope to see you again soon.